Here's what we got here. This is one of the most interesting games, one of the most interesting, I say, I've seen in the playoffs in years. And here's why. I could make a case for about 5 minutes why you should bet Cincy, and then I could make a case for about 5 minutes why you should bet the Raiders. So let's start, not 5 minutes, but let's start on Cincy. One, you could look at the results recently and say they're as hot as any team in the NFL. You toss out the last week when they didn't play their starters, and you say this is a team that beat Kansas City with a lot at stake. Kansas City lost the number 1 seed by losing that game a couple weeks ago. And they came back, Cincinnati, from a deficit. So you're beating the team that's been conference championship losers, Kansas City, a couple years or 3 years ago. Then they made the Super Bowl and won it. Then they made the Super Bowl and lost it. So that means they've literally been 3 wins away from winning 3 straight Super Bowls. That's how far Kansas City has advanced, how good they've been. And in a must-win game for the only bye that Kansas City was in control of, they lost. And then you add in the way that Cincinnati's played. If you look at the Baltimore blowout, you look at the Baltimore blowout before that, you look at the domination of the Steelers. I mean, it's like in both games, it's like, wow, this team's good, right? And now you got the Raiders who got, let's be candid, lucky to make the playoffs. Now, it was a gutsy game, and give them a ton of credit. But in games in which that were decided by less than a touchdown, 6 points or less, the tight games, the Raiders are 7-1. 7 winners, 1 loser in tight games. In the other games decided by a touchdown or more, the Raiders are 3-6. So if you assume with a coin flip, and tight games generally are a coin flip, and people will say, no, Russell Wilson, he's the type that's going to really win a close game, or so-and-so, Burrow is going to win a close. History says no, it just isn't the case. That typically those games are coin flips. They've been outscored on the season, the Raiders, by 65 points. So you look at it and you say, wow, that all points to Cincinnati. Look how good Cincy's been. Look how bad the Raiders have been. And by the way, the last 4 wins the Raiders have had, AJ, a combined 12 points. Not per game, combined.
Total.
Yeah, so they've been good in tough spots, but in close spots, but that doesn't tend to predict the future very well. All right, now, there's another thing here that makes you think maybe it's not the Raiders being edge here. Now, the last thing that was against the Raiders is obviously the Sunday night to the first game on Saturday. I mean, effectively, that's about 2 days less rest. And then you count the way they celebrated after that first victory. It was like they won or not the first victory, but the victory before making the playoffs. And it was like on that Sunday night game, it was like, wow, it looks like they won the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have celebrated, but I'm saying, what does that mean for now? You have to travel all the way across the country and play an early game a day early. All right? An early game a day early after you played the last game of the season, Sunday night. All pointing to Cincy. Here's why I don't like Cincy. One is the Raiders' D-line is it's probably the best position group on the team, offense or defense. But it's certainly the strength of their defense. And Cincinnati's O-line is bad. And ever since they lost Riley Reif, one of their best linemen, it's been worse. And it's been amazing that Burrow's done what he's done with his bad O-line. But it's even more of a problem when it's against a team that doesn't blitz. Now, that's a key point here. If you look at the games against blitzing teams that Cincy played, and you're not hearing this one anywhere else, this is really important, and I have not heard this anywhere. Against blitzing teams, Cincinnati's done exceptionally well. Burrow's been so good against the blitz. Why? Because he's a fast processor. What he does is he can look at the field and quickly know where to go with the ball. It's just one of his greatest strengths because it's not his arm strength. It's not – what else could it be? He's not a physical marvel, but he's a great – or I say borderline now, great quarterback. It's been against the blitzing teams. Baltimore, blitzing team. Pittsburgh, blitzing team, and then Kansas City, blitzing team. They played them once. In those 5 games, they've been outstanding in those games. And by the way, we tossed out Week 18 because it doesn't count because they didn't play their starters. In those games, it's gone over 4 out of 5, and they've scored 14 more points per game than was projected by the Vegas line. So literally, they're scoring Cincinnati 2 touchdowns more per game than expected in the 5 games against blitzing teams. Against the other games, against the other teams that don't blitz that much, they're 4-7 under the total, and they've scored, they've scored actually 15 less points per game. So against those blitzing teams, they average 39 points a game. Against the non-blitzing teams, 24. Now, some of these teams blitz, but it's not like it's in their blood. It's not like the key. You know who blitzed the least amount in the entire NFL? The Raiders. Yep. So it's really a setup. Now, if you look at the first game, Cincy actually scored okay, but there was turnovers and fluky scores. They didn't really do great yardage-wise. The underlying stats in that game were saying, boy, the Bengals had a below-average offensive game. The scoring looks fine, but that's deceiving. So, and that helps us here get value on the under. And that is my bonus best bet. And if you could, AJ, look up or check on the screen and get me the most updated number.
48.5, most updated number.
Okay. Now, if you were doing this, it'd be 50, right? But I'm going to go 48.5 on the under. And it really is about the fact that the Raiders, though on a short week, and it's important to say, the Raiders have taken serious money this week. This has been the biggest move of any of the games, has been on the Raiders. And to me, it didn't make sense, and that made me dig way in because the short week, the travel, I was thinking, man, it's going to be a Cincy blowout. And then when I saw the move this week, I said, well, there's something happening here. And it makes a ton of sense to me that and if you actually look at Joe Burrow in the games against the non-blitzing teams, his QBR is 46. Now, listen, this is 11 games. 46 is like significantly below average. 52 is the average in QBR. So, because it's 1 to 100, like a percentage, but because passers have gotten better since they invented QBR, it's kind of drifted up. The average is a little above 50. 46. This is a guy that some people say should be MVP, and I'm not sure that's wrong when you add it all up. But when you have 5 games that you have a QBR of 77, which would lead the league, and it wouldn't even be close. No one has a QBR on the season of all games over 70 this year. So he's 77, and that's against really good teams. I mean, Baltimore, you can debate how good, but earlier in the year they were certainly good. Against Baltimore, Pittsburgh's a playoff team, and against Kansas City, probably the best team in the AFC. So to have a QBR of 77 against those teams and a QBR of 46 against lesser teams, it's got to be scheme. And we're talking 11 games against those lesser teams. The under, I think, is a really strong play. AJ, what do you think?
I love it. I also think that the fact that there's 2 quarterbacks and 2 coaches making their playoff debut, I think you see a conservative game plan. I think the injury at the end of the last game for Joe Burrow means you don't see, a heavy Joe Burrow game either. I think that everything points to this being a low-scoring, grinded-out game.
Now, remember in like the infomercials, and they said, and you think, something, I might order this. I might order this George Foreman grill or something. And then at the end, they go, and that's not all. You know that part of it? And then they throw in steak knives?
Yes.
Here comes the steak knives. Derek Carr, when it's cold. Now, I hear it's going to be below 30. And, you go to the different places, you get different reports. So we looked at, and obviously this is the extreme, like it's cold, below 30, it's below freezing. He's had 2 games in his career that was the case. Now, in his entire career, he's had 127 games. If we look at QBR, Derek Carr's QBR in the 2 games, where does it rank out of the 127, the 2 cold games? One is number 127. I don't know if you remember. There's 127 games. That would
be
worst.
last.
That's the worst. And the other one, now think of 127 in your head right now. The other one was 124. That's the fourth worst. So literally, and his QBR, I mean, this sounds like it's a misprint, was 6.4 on average in those two games. Oh. Remember, a bad QBR is 46. 6. Not 46, 6. And I mean, just quickly listen, the team scored 11 points per game in those two games. And the completion percentage, which is what, about 66% on average now? 46%. Yardage per game, let's say 230 is the average. 123 yards per game. That's passing. Yards per attempt, average in the NFL is 7.5, 5.5. So more interceptions than touchdowns. So his worst game was in the cold. His fourth worst game was in the cold, Derek Carr. And all the other stats are horrible. So now you got Joe Burrow against a team that plays a scheme that he tends to be average, if not below against, a non-blitzing scheme. And you got, and I think making a great case, AJ, conservative coaches. I don't know if I should maybe play repeat from here. We should just play this 10 minutes again and again. What do you think, AJ?
There's too much other stuff to talk about.
All right, then.